Yo, what's going on, people? This is actually not a rant video. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. I do want to talk about problems in Master Duel, but not to complain, rather to say like this is just how games are. And I changed my expectations so I don't lose my sanity playing this game. And this is just for the people in the comments that express how displeased they are with Master Duel. But objectively, Master Duel is a fine game, man. It's just your expectations probably need some tweaking. So overall, I enjoy Master Duel. Great game. Obviously not a perfect game, but there never is a perfect game. But one thing that bothered me though is the fact that like once you get to the top ranks, there's only like really 5 or 6 decks you can play. So that got me kind of bummed. Then I realized like this is nothing new. Like this happens in literally any PvP game, no matter what genre. Like for example, Smash Bros, there's like 20 or 30 characters. But once you get to competitive play, everyone's only playing like 4 dudes, like Marth, Fox. That's just how games are. They're not balanced, and a small percent of the content is stronger than the rest of it. Meaning about like 80% of characters, or in terms of Master Duel, like 80% of cards or archetypes aren't playable competitively. But does that necessarily mean I have to ignore the 80% of cards that are not the optimal decks? No, like there's no rule or reason saying I'm not allowed to enjoy those other cards. The fact is I play pretty much whatever deck I want nowadays, and that's why you'll see a broad range of decks on this channel. Sometimes it's a meta deck, sometimes it's a meme deck, and sometimes it's just right in that sweet spot where it could hang against some meta decks, but it's just doing what the meta decks do, just worse. For example, Rocket Dragon Maids. But regardless of how strong a deck is, I can honestly say, no cope, that I can enjoy playing that deck. And the key is handling your expectations. Like for example, yeah, I'm gonna play Dragon Maids because I like thighs, I like dragons, and on a good day they pump out 4 negate boards like it's nobody's business. But I know if I play Rocket Dragon Maids, I'm gonna brick sometimes because the deck is just bricky like that. Also, I'm gonna lose coin flips and have to end up scooping against like Godhand and Drytrons going first. And it's just not as strong as if I play something like Bird Up, which is my main competitive deck. I've already accepted this. Like, I'm not necessarily playing Dragon Maids to win. I'm playing it mostly because I enjoy the archetype. If it wins, then that's just a cherry on top. So right now in this video, you're seeing Magical Musketeers. The reason I wanted to try this is because I faced it on the ladder and it looked pretty fun because you could just play traps from your hand. But it also bricks like a mofo. So later in the video, I'll talk about this deck if you're interested. This is the power of alts, boys. My main's already in plat, so I pretty much have to play sweaty decks there. But if I wanted to ever try something new in 10 minutes, I can just literally make a new Steam to try any deck I want. And the other good thing about making an alt is that since you do get newly ranked, then you can face a mixed bag of people instead of just pure sweaty people. And then obviously some cringe people would be like, oh, but then you're not actually facing any good decks, so how do you know if the deck you're trying is actually good? Like, bro, if I'm trying a new archetype, competitiveness is not the first thing on my mind. I just want to try the deck and have fun with it. And you'd think by now that these meta mouth breathers will have realized that, yes, if you're not playing one of the 5 or 6 known top tier decks, then obviously it's not going to be as good. Hello? Like, you don't need to face these decks to know this, my boy. Anyways, I like the experience of getting alts up to plat 5 because on the way, you get to learn a new deck archetype against a variety of different opponent difficulties and different decks. Like the variety is the most before plat 5. And by the way, don't get me wrong, like I don't hate people simply for playing meta decks. I too am both a meta deck enjoyer and a meme deck enjoyer. The only time it really gets cringe is when like there's a player that only plays meta decks and they expect that the only motivation anyone would ever have to build any deck is for competitiveness. The flip side is also stupid where non-meta players will judge meta players for wanting to be competitive. Bottom line is there's more than one way to enjoy this game, so just enjoy it how you want and stop worrying about how other people want to enjoy the game. Like, as tilted as I get from Eldritch players or Phantom Knight 200 move turn Andes or Drytron perfect board, I hate facing those decks, but at the end of the day, I can respect that, like, that's the deck they want to play. That's how they want to enjoy the game, so whatever. And in that sense, it's not necessarily right to say just play to have fun, don't play to win, because for some people, having fun does mean winning, and it does mean playing the most competitive decks. I've seen a lot of comments express how, you know, some decks literally just set up a full board of negates and then you end up not being able to do anything. Then they wonder how it can be fun for the other player to just deny them like that. Like, boy, yeah, you're not having fun, but I can sure as hell guarantee that they're having fun denying your ass. And like, sadly, that's just how the game is at the highest levels. And that's something that Konami is okay with, and I don't think they're gonna drastically remove that. So if you dislike that, then that sucks because that's just how the game is. It means that this might not be the game for you. Master Duel at its core is just setting up the most uncounterable strategy, the most uninteractive thing that you can think of so that you can guarantee the win. And the beauty is that sometimes you're on the giving end, sometimes you're on the receiving end of that. And sometimes if you're lucky, it's not that black and white. Like there's a gray area, which is when hand traps and interrupts are being used on turn 1. Some people don't like that whole thing, but hey, that's the direction that Konami went to. So anyways, let me go ahead and show some comments that are related to today's video. But I didn't want to be toxic, so disclaimer. Don't go looking for my boy 2 brain cells out there because this is not actually a real person. It's just me paraphrasing what actual commenters wrote. And also I don't do this often, so don't go writing stupid comments just to try to be in the next one. You might actually just get shadow banned, because at that point I can't tell who actually only has 2 brain cells or if you're just memeing. But yeah, some people, like I just mentioned, don't realize that 100% of Exodia and burn decks are just meme or gimmick decks. But they're still thinking of, like, how good would this Exodia deck's win rate be? Yo, Guns, you're a scammer. Exodia doesn't actually win this much. Like, no, dude, that's not the main point of playing Exodia or burn decks. There was this one dude that's like, oh, you're not showing what happens when the deck bricks. You're not showing all the bricks. I'm just like, yeah, man, please let me know how uploading generic losses on a meme deck highlight video, by the way, is purposeful in any way. But thankfully, 99% of people know that meme decks are not played for the win rate. It's kind of crazy how some people need that disclaimer. Then some are asking what happens if you don't open Nurse. Watch the Nurse Burn vid for context if you don't know what Nurse Burn is, but some people are genuinely curious, so that's okay. But then there's some people that are asking because they're like, oh yeah, Guns, I'm on to you, Guns. You don't always open Nurse, but you're not showing what happens when you don't open Nurse. And it's like, dude, what do you think happens when I don't open Nurse? Give me your best guess, man. Do you think I magically hack the game then and add Nurse to my hand? Or maybe it's just as simple as I lose the duel. That's what happens to gimmick decks. And again, no hate against meta players, right? But there's a difference between just a meta enjoyer and a meta mouth breather. People like, they can't seem to get their mind off of, oh, what's the deck's win rate? As if it's the only reason ever to play any deck. Like at that point, just play one deck. Just find the strongest one deck, play only that, and why even bother watching any videos on any other decks? Just play that one deck. And it's at this point where I'm like, is the Master Duel esports scene here yet? Are people getting paid to win in Master Duel now? Because that's what people be acting like. The bottom line of this video is yes, there's only a few competitive decks at the top of Master Duel, but that's okay. Almost any deck can reach Plat 5, so you can just play what you enjoy, although not every deck should be expected to hit Plat 1. Also, rank is very arbitrary anyway. People are too worried about their ranks right now, but honestly, nobody's getting cash or trophies for any of this, so why worry about it so much instead of just enjoying the game? But anyways, that's enough of that. So here's the Magical Musketeer deck that I was trying out. The archetype is based on activating traps from the hand, which in theory, that's actually kind of nuts because they have a counter trap too, which you can just play straight up from your hand. And the monsters also have an additional effect when any spell or trap is played in the same column. And this is how the deck generates value and keeps recycling resources. So you already know, like in that sense, this is kind of like any other control deck. And by the way, as for the extra deck, the only real core is Musketeer Max. If you just wanted to try it out, you just need like one Musketeer Max. For a complete version, you'd probably need like 2. The rest of the extra deck is just an Accesscode climb package so that the deck can have a finisher. It doesn't really have strong monsters, but once you get control of the board, you can go Accesscode, boost it up, finish them off. And we also have an Xyz package in case you wanted to go Zodiacs into ZEUS. And this Zenmaines guy is just for the level 3. Because it can also go Downerd into ZEUS. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a really feast or famine deck. If you open well, and your first Musketeer monster doesn't get destroyed or shut down somehow, then usually you'll slowly inch them out and win the game. So here's one against Drytrons. I should probably go out with a full disclaimer so that our boy 2 brain cells doesn't come out guns blazing here. But this is not the best of Drytron players, or he opened with a pretty bad hand. But regardless, Magical Musketeer does have ways to deal with this deck. In the 10% of the time that they don't open with with ultimateness. But actually, I get a big effect veiler off here on Fafnir. So he does get ultimateness, but he doesn't have that many negates. Actually, he has no negates right now. During the game, there's like no prompt period, so he definitely does not have a fairy in his hand. Here I'm just generating some value by using traps in the same column as my monster. I brain farted here, but do know it's an option to banish Meteonus Drytron with your Dancing Needle. Drytron's only runs one copy of that, so you could potentially shut him down just like that. Here I actually opted to wait for his turn before I use Desperado because Caspar's little resource search is only once per turn. But in control resource decks like this, you're trying to like make the most value. So he actually drew a negate off his draw phase, but with this deck, it's fine because he's actually not negating the monsters, he's negating the spells and traps. But as long as my Caspar was up, I can just keep getting new spells and traps. Then I don't know if you were paying attention to this replay earlier, it's the full heroes board. The crazy thing about Musketeer Max is the number of monsters they control. That's how many spells and traps you can pull from your deck with this effect. So actually, I think I was only running 5 different trap names, but I get to add literally every one of them to my hand here. I remember some mans in the chat thought like you can't break this board with Magical Musketeer, but heroes are really lacking in some form of like hard CC or interrupt. Like essentially it's just a bunch of big bodies that have nothing to show for. But this guy did scoop pretty prematurely, like I still had some work to do on that board. All Magical Musketeer traps and spells are all once per turn as well. Here's one against Cyber Dragons. I'm gonna try to explain the actual like specific card effects this time, in case someone actually wanted to try out this archetype. I got a good opening hand. Caspar and Kidbrave are both good monsters to open with, and I have Desperado, which is a destruction. Kidbrave, if you activate in his column, you can discard 1 Musketeer card to draw 2 more cards. So that gives me some cards for his turn, which by the way, you never have to set any cards with this deck because you can just play them from hand. Here I pop the Musketeer Last Stand counter trap, which is for any spell or trap, just negate it. Kidbrave goes ahead and draws 2 more. Unfortunately, I didn't get any more spells or traps that could help me in this situation. I do have the quick play spell though, which is nuts. It reduces our attack to 0 and negates all effects. And imagine like your opponent just never knows how many of these traps or spells you have, because there's no indicator, you play them from the hand. Anyways, here's Caspar. So he adds another spell or trap if you play in his column. Here I'm just gonna effect veil the Cyber Dragon core, prevent a search from going on. I have a Desperado trap in my hand as well as another quick play, so I can destroy one monster and negate another monster and reduce its attack to 0. So I have a couple of answers for some stuff you might want to go out into. I'm going to Desperado that. He's going to try to attack with the other thing. That's just going to get hit with a quick play and he's out.